Hello, Natural Resource Development. Carolyn here. I am so excited. We are in Module 1. I am really looking forward to having you guys in this course. To me, this whole degree is just amazing. I'm so fascinated. I hope that by the end of this class, you guys will share the same passion that I have. And who knows, maybe some of you that are not currently in the major, maybe this will inspire you to actually switch majors and become a major in global sustainable tourism. This industry is booming, it is growing. We don't have enough people that are prepared to actually work in it, which is why we developed this program. And it's fascinating because you can literally work anywhere in the world, doing a good thing for the planet and for you and for the people in the host community. So in this first module, there's a lot going on. First of all, the organization is such that there's an introductory page that just shows the learning outcomes, shows what this module is about. Then you'll click on pages. So I've organized the content in this course in pages. You'll see that's on the page, the first page where I say read first. We really talk about kind of what is sustainable tourism, what is nature-based tourism, and how do we get there. So in this video, I'm just going to go quickly over some of those concepts in this first module to help you guys understand it. But please read all of the pages, look at the videos, and also read the links that I posted to external websites that help you understand the concept. Okay, super excited to have you guys, and I just love the material in this. I just want to give you guys a quick background. My major in undergrad was actually in recreation management, so more specializing in people and like activities, and then I switched to nature-based tourism for my master's in the Netherlands. And then for my PhD, I focused on tourism in the natural environment. So I combined those two. So in this class, I'm just offering you guys everything I learned in all those 3 degrees as it concerns tourism and the environment, which is a really just a fascinating topic because, since COVID, we really, we really gone outside more, right? We want to travel more outside. And yet we have this predicament of also preserving the environment. Okay, so back to the class and how sustainable tourism came about. So the first thing I go over in this first module is Jafar Jafari's platforms. That's really just a framework for you guys to understand how did sustainable tourism, not nature-based tourism, not tourism in natural environments, but sustainable tourism actually come about. Sustainable tourism came about as one of the niche markets. When you look at the platforms, just briefly, right? So international travel happened after the 1950s, in the 1950s really, after World War II, right? In World War II, obviously people weren't traveling. Once the war ended, we had peace, we had discretionary time, discretionary income, and we had the technology for people to safely travel in a way that they could afford longer distances. And so that's where international tourism really started to become a mass form of tourism. In those first years, we had 500,000 international travelers. This has now tripled, right? So we have over 1 billion international tourists traveling before COVID. We were supposed to have 2 billion, but then COVID happened. Obviously nobody was traveling during COVID. We all remember that. But yet, just like 1 or 2 years after COVID now, we're really on a fast growth of recovery where we're going to hit that 2 billion very, very soon. So in the 1950s, when that international travel first started, right, people thought tourism was just fabulous. There was no negatives, that everything was great, right? It was a smokestackless industry that had no negatives, and all the countries should be promoting it. Well, as early as the 1970s, we started actually noticing some of those impacts. And later on in the class, we'll talk more about those impacts, especially in natural environments. But that's when we shifted from that advocacy platform, just advocating for tourism, it was all great, to the cautionary platform. Now we're saying, wait a minute, let's be cautious here because there really are some negative impacts of tourism, right? Then in the 1980s, I'm going really fast through these, as you can tell, because we have a lot of stuff to cover. We go through the adaptancy platform, and this is where all these alternative forms of tourism were developed to adapt tourism to a more positive form of development. So we're trying to shift from mass tourism that has all these negative impacts to now we see ecotourism coming about, we see nature-based tourism coming about, we see homestay tourism, volunteer tourism, sustainable tourism. All of those kind of niche forms of tourism are being developed. Now, as I mentioned in the introduction to this course, sustainable tourism by no means is niche anymore. It's actually something that is essential for the industry to survive. And even in mass tourism, we see things like JetBlue. We talk about carbon footprints. We talk about green hotels. Expedia has, listings. I mean, everybody, Google has ways where you can now filter for more carbon neutral flights. So the industry is taking it on. Okay, so we have that adaptancy platform, and then we have the knowledge-based platform, right? That basically says we need knowledge, we need to know impacts, we need data so we can actually manage tourism sustainably. So that is really what it's about. Now, then I quickly go into sustainable development in case you haven't heard it in any other classes, but the definition that we most often use is the one by the Brundtland Commission, and that was first articulated in 1973. It then became really, really famous, and partly it became famous because it's so universally acceptable, because it's so broad. Quite honestly, it's so broad. That definition basically states it's development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Now, tell me, that really could be anything. As we apply that to tourism, you can kind of think, well, that's basically tourism that doesn't take away the ability of future generations to meet their own needs through tourism, right? So again, that concept became universally agreed on, and so we're using that, and we're also applied that to tourism now, which is kind of the definition of sustainable tourism. I quickly go over the 17 SDGs. I'm not going to go through them now because I am almost sure that you've heard of them in other classes because now they are so famous. If you haven't, please click on the link here to actually look at that. The last term I'm kind of throwing at you guys in this first page is over-tourism. And over-tourism is important. Why? I'm sure you guys have heard it. Is that too many people in one particular place lead to negative consequences. Over-tourism, by definition, is not sustainable. And so you see in places like Barcelona, Venice, Amsterdam, people are protesting. They're protesting tourism. They're sick of it. They want their city back. They want their quality of life back. They don't want tourists. And it is actually impacting really their lifestyle, and they're resentful against tourists, and it's harming, again, the city, the structure of the city. But it's not only happening in built environments, it is also happening in natural environments. Only natural environments, maybe we don't need millions of people to go. Maybe for over tourism to happen in natural environments, actually only a fewer percentage of people is needed, right? I'm going to pause it real quick here. I'm going to show you guys the next page and I'll be right back. Okay, so now I'm on that third page, which is the page on tourism in natural areas. There's not that much information in there, so you're good. Two things I want to quickly point out. One is that whole philosophical debate on whether or not tourism and the environments actually go together. So there's people that have argued from the get-go that tourists or any kind of human impact is gonna harm the environment. They're not compatible, and if we really want to preserve, we should just not allow tourists or humans in general to go into this area, be that for whatever activity, extracting, tourism, whatever, right? And then there's others that say, no, wait a minute, tourism is a little bit different. We can actually use tourism to be a tool for conservation, which we'll talk about later in this class as well. And if we manage it sustainably, we can actually have both. We can have humans and the environment coexist, right? And humans can actually go in nature. And for that, for you to better understand that, I talk about the World Conservation Union categories. And I want you guys to take really a quick look at that. So these are universal categories. So when they say national park, this is not a U.S. national park. This is a national park based on the IUCN categories, okay? So they have basically 6 different categories, going from a strict nature preserve. Now you can already imagine just by the name of this is no human contact, okay? That's just preserved. And, we'll talk about the philosophy's action, but there is people who argue for that. There's people who argue that in and of itself, nature has a right to be unspoiled by humans, and we need to just, for the sake of nature, to leave parts of nature really without human impact, right? So there's that. So that's the strict nature reserve. Then we go to national park, natural monument, habitat or species management area. You can see how with each category we're getting more human interaction, where now we even have management actions, right? Then we have a protected landscape or seascape, and then we have a managed resource protection area. Okay. And so when we talk about humans and tourism especially, we really talk about categories 2, 3, and 4 that offer the most opportunity for conservation, but also human impact. Okay, so I'm just giving this to you guys so that you know those exist. And one of the assignments is I want you guys to pick one of those anywhere in the world and do your assignment on that. Okay, I am back. Lastly, going super fast, I'm going to go over the PowerPoint that I posted, which is basically the introduction to sustainable tourism, some of the terminology. So on page 2, the first thing I mentioned to you guys is really nature-based tourism. And nature-based tourism, which is the form of tourism we have in this class, again, has several subcategories. Okay, part of that can be adventure tourism, which is anything that has high risk. So cycling, biking, parasailing, mountain biking, skiing, all of those, that's adventure tourism. Then we have ecotourism. Within ecotourism, we have soft and hard ecotourism, which you'll learn in this class. Then we have extractive tourism, which is basically anything where you take something from nature. So say, for example, fishing would be a form of extractive tourism, depending on how you fish, hunting, those kinds of things, right? There's big arguments over the hunting in Africa, right? And so on. And then we also have a form of 3S, which is just the sun, sea, and fun tourism. But that also can be in nature, right? So you can see that not all nature-based tourism is automatically sustainable. There are forms of mass tourism that happen in nature-based tourism, right? And so then I just go over some of the general tourism terminologies. I'm not going to go through that in this video because some of you guys, I think, have already taken tourism classes. If you haven't, these slides are for you to kind of go over, what is tourism, the components of tourism. You really see that tourism is fascinating because in terms of the components, we have the natural resources, which we focus in on this class. We also have the built environment, which are focused in on other classes such as hotels, resorts, blah, blah, blah. We have the operating sectors that offer services, right? Then we have the government and the host community that wants certain things out of tourism. We have the tourists that we can study, right? What do they want? How do they act? Who wants to go where? Those kinds of things. And then we have the host community that, like I mentioned, may be happy with tourism or not. What do they have to offer? Those kinds of things. So it's actually a really fascinating thing. I already mentioned international tourism, that it expanded. I quickly in this lecture also go into the expansion of international tourism. So after World War II, like I just mentioned, the first phase or stage of international tourism was really between the more developed countries. That kind of makes sense, mainly between Europe and America. And then also we have a little bit with Australia, but it's kind of far. So we had that stage. Then we went from the more developed, and I'm using these terms very in quotes, right? The more developed countries to the less developed countries. So in the States, we saw this tourism to the Caribbean, for example, to the islands. In Europe, we saw tourism going to Northern Africa and then the Mediterranean, right? Those kinds of things. And now, of course, we're in stage 3, where the biggest tourism growth is in the Middle East, in Asia, right? So it's really anywhere. Okay, then we'll talk about, I'm going to skip through these exactly. I already mentioned the Jafari's platforms earlier in this video, so we can go through that fastly. The next concept that we talk about in some of the other tourism classes is the destination life cycle model. And this is just a really good example in sustainable tourism about a cautionary platform, right? So how tourism can go wrong if we don't plan for it. Now, this is not just for nature-based destinations, any kind of destination, but it basically says that if we let tourism develop as it is, we're going to end up at a place where we only attract a certain amount of small population of tourists, and that is not good, because when we are limited to whoever, just 25% of the population that's interested in our product, we only attract those 25%, and so we need to basically compete on price. This is when you see destinations do the package tours or the flight and hotel combos, big discounts, those kinds of things, right? So the life cycle model basically means that each destination goes through several stages, just like a normal product goes, if any of you guys have taken a marketing class, right? So we go from the introduction, where maybe nobody wants to buy, right? So those first people in tourism that actually travel to a destination, I don't know if anybody has seen the movie The Beach, are actually backpackers a lot of times, right? They're very allocentric. They're really focused on the culture. getting to know anything, mainly because there's really no facilities. There's no tourism infrastructure there. It's just, you know, the local chicken bus or depending on where you are, the local accommodation, local food, right? And so those backpackers, those allocentrics go first, then word gets around. If you haven't seen the movie The Beach, it's a true story actually, of what happened to one of the destinations in Thailand, and word gets around, people start talking, more people come, right? A new type of traveler comes that maybe wants more things, and so the destination gets developed. So this is the development stage, right? And then we go into basically where it gets more developed, more standardized. Now chains are coming in to where it's basically just a destination like any other, right? And we unfortunately see this now in international tourism, where we can travel almost anywhere in the world, and we find the same chains, the same restaurants, the same, right? And it's just kind of become standardized, and that's part of the problem of that, right? So once we reach that, we are not really competitive anymore, because we didn't safeguard what made us special, right? Okay, then we talk about the different types of tourists. Again, I'm not going to go through that too much, but I already mentioned the allocentric really focus is more on the culture of the host destination, while the psychocentric is more focused on their culture. And so when you put those two together, again, 25% psychocentrics, 25% allocentrics. Once a destination gets to the point where they only attract psychocentrics, they're in trouble, right? And so that's really what this is about. I go through the stages here that you guys can see. And lastly, I just finish up with kind of tourism and the sheer size of it. And I already mentioned that, how fast this industry grew from like 500,000 travelers to almost 2 billion in really 50 years. So fast growth, right? Third largest industry. We talk about the tourism as an export earner. It's still growing, right? The WTTC, the World Travel and Tourism Council, has great statistics. If any of you guys really want to check out different countries and how they're growing and how much they're making. So it's big business. And I'm showing you guys some of those numbers in the next slides here, right? It's big employment. You know, sometimes it's 3, 4, 5% of a country's GDP. It you know, offers a lot of jobs, direct and indirect, and it redistributes wealth, but sometimes not, right? And so again, just look at those slides. Then we go into some of those specific benefits and not. So, you know, what it can do positive for the economy and for society. And that's in the next slide. So just look at that. And then we talk about sustainable tourism. I already mentioned some of those concepts to you guys. So that's it for module 1. For your assignment, I want you guys to actually look into this trampling study. Now, I know that for the first module, this is like, what? It's an academic article. It's an article on trampling. So trampling is basically a negative impact that happens when we walk or step on nature, like any kind of ecosystem, right? So like a grass, gravel, whatever, forest. But what I like about the study is that it uses really creative technology. So it actually measures trampling through photographs. And so I want you guys just to try to read it, try to understand it. You don't have to read the whole thing line by line. Just kind of get the gist of the article, the gist of the findings, and then just answer the questions that I posted in the assignment. Okay, so that's your assignment. It's due on Sunday. And then I also posted a really short over tourism video that just explains the concept a little bit more. Okay, hope you have a wonderful week, and I'll see you guys in module 2. Ciao, ciao.